friends. I'm not Hedy Amiramati. Here. Let me turn that off. My name is Andy Falco Jimenez, which you can see right here. Andy Falco, and I'm here from Orange County, California. Today is going to be, I believe, it is going to be a much shorter show than yesterday's show. But if you missed it, you may want to watch it when you have some time. It's an hour and a half. You can skip through parts of it. If you already know some of my background, just go ahead and skip the first part of it. And you'll get to the point where we start talking about the more complex problems that we have facing law enforcement as we go into the next decade, where we are now losing so many veteran officers. The officers that have experience, that have either been in patrol for a period of time and then were transferred to detectives or investigator or a special crimes unit. Maybe they went to helicopter, canines, equestrian, whatever it is, SWAT team, that you have essentially your basic training through patrol work. If you're a police officer, if you're a sheriff deputy, quite often you go to the jails first and work in the jail system for a little while. And then after the jail system, then you go out to patrol. And then you get put in all these other specialized details. So what we're going to be losing, and what we have been losing over the last 2 or 3 years in particular, and earlier than normal, are all of these officers who have experience, 10, 20, 30 years of experience of not only working in patrol, but in all these other specialized details. Like me, I was a patrol officer, then I went to K9. While I was both in patrol and K9, at times I observed in the helicopter. And I was also on the SWAT team. And so that period of time, that first 10 years of my career, working in the helicopter, working on the SWAT team, working in patrol and working in the K9 unit, I experienced a lot of different things that many police officers and some of these smaller police departments don't get to experience because there's so few officers and there's so few positions. Sometimes when an officer changes into a crimes person's position, like homicide or robbery or even sex crimes or something like that, they quite often stay there for years, and it takes time, unless in the procedure manual it says you'll only do so many years and then you have to move or rotate or go somewhere else. That may be more prevalent now. It wasn't necessarily at Anaheim Police Department where I was. And so you would gain all this information and knowledge, but what you would be able to do is, if you do go back down to patrol, say you're in family crimes like I was, from patrol, I went into family crimes and then into sex crimes. And then I went back to patrol because I became the K9 trainer for the police department. And what I was able to do was take that experience that I learned as a detective, which is a completely different perspective than what you have from a patrol officer. As a patrol officer, you're responding to calls, you're taking the initial reports, you're doing the initial interviews with the victims and the suspects and the witnesses, and then turning in a report. It gets to a detective, and now the detective takes the next half or the next part of an investigation, which entails quite often things that have to do with when or if you read somebody their Miranda rights and whether they do it and how it is they do it. Do they do it out of custody or in custody? To the investigations, which then what does a witness maybe sometimes turn into a suspect? Does a suspect actually turn out to be not a suspect, and now you have to find a different one? And you have all these things that now you learn that you did not learn as a patrol officer necessarily, because in that position, again, you're the initial responder, and then the detective is the follow-up. You have ID techs that come in and do fingerprinting and photographing and measurements and evidence collection and all kinds of things that you get experience doing all those things. And so what we're losing are all of those core people that have tons of experience, that gain them knowledge, which is going to be important as we go forward on this particular show as to why the Uvalde officers froze and why other officers freeze when it comes to some of these incidents that aren't those that happen every day. School shootings may happen in a jurisdiction, and in many cases never happen in a jurisdiction. And so you rarely have somebody who has had experience with a school shooting, or somebody that has been through the investigation of a school shooting, because unless one happens in your jurisdiction or in your city or county, then the only knowledge you get is from a class or from what somebody else tells you. And that is not the same as living out the experience of being involved in the actual, live experience of being at the scene of a shooting, an active shooter situation where you are seeing what's happening, you're taking in what's happening, you're experiencing what's happening, the noises, the smells, the sights that you see, all the complexities that happen with something that's an active shooter situation. If you don't live it, the only way you get that experience is through a PowerPoint presentation and the experience of somebody telling a story. This is what I saw next. This is what we did that worked. This is what we did that didn't work. And so those are two completely different things. So understand that is so important to remember as we try to figure out what went wrong at Uvalde. Now, as I said yesterday, I don't know everything. Why? Because in the first thing that went wrong in Uvalde, other than way more children and the teacher probably were killed than should have, other than that very, very important detail, the aftermath, what happened afterwards was the bad communication. Again, this is the first sign that I saw when I began watching the news reports. It was like hours after, maybe an hour or two afterwards, you had your first spokesman come on, or maybe it was 3 or 4 hours afterwards, you had your first spokesman come on. And I'm not sure how many of you heard this guy, and I wish I could remember who he was, but he sounded like probably a lieutenant, maybe a sergeant, maybe the information officer that's their job is to talk to the press. But what I first heard come out of his description of what went on was my first sign that it went horribly wrong, because there was really no thought other than we have to make sure and cover our asses in this happen, because to me, it sounded like he was really trying hard to portray the officers that were there as heroes. That was his first message that he was trying to get out, because he was trying to protect the police department. Somehow I know that he knew that it went horribly wrong, that something went wrong, because all he talked about, every sentence he ended with, oh, and these heroes did an amazing job. These heroes went right in. These heroes responded, ran to gunfire, all the typical nonsense words that people say that seems to be where they're overdoing it in order to try to make something sound better than it actually was. And that really was one of the first things that I thought when I heard it, like, something's not right, because you heard very little detail, but you heard about all of this other stuff that really was like, okay, no, we know officers can be heroes. We know they can do the right thing, but what happened here? And so then what happens is then you have somebody else come in, and now you have this snowball of bad information that comes out, because now everybody is trying to cover their asses. And that is the first sign that you have a department. That's my first sign. If I was to be the officer that I am sometimes, that gets called, hey, I want you to look at all this evidence, all this discovery, police reports, videos, audio recordings. I have so many on my computer right now that I get sent from police departments. Hey, Andy, we need you to look at all this stuff and tell us what you think about what right, what wrong, what it is that we need to know about what really happened on this day, because we have the police report that says one thing. We have a PR report, some type of newscast or some type of interview recording. We have the crime scene pictures, which I looked at. We have sometimes the body cams of the officers that were actually there, and they say, Andy, look at all this stuff, and you, as an expert, you tell us what it is that you think about what happened on this day. And so then I begin to go through it, and it begins to tell a little bit of a different story. That's what's written in the police report, what's told by the IPO or the information officer that is speaking for the department, and maybe whoever other spokesperson they go to talk about stuff, that some of these things don't match up. They said they went right in, but wait a minute. I see the timestamp on the video starts at 1 minute, whatever, that 33 seconds and whatever, and then nothing's happening until you get to minute 10 or minute 60, which is in this case is when some things actually started to happen. You go, that doesn't line up to what they said to the cameras on that day. And that's not what's written in the police report. And this happens a lot. Now, is it on purpose? In this case, I think it was. In this case, I think they saw that they needed to cover their butts a little bit, and they were hoping, which is not going to happen. This is one of the most ridiculous things out of everything, is that you think as the IPO or the chief of police or the lieutenant who decides I'm going to get on camera and get some FaceTime and spout out this crap, that you think nobody's going to find out. That's how you know, again, I keep coming back to this, you have an inexperienced police department that doesn't know how to handle this type of situation when it's occurring. And then after it occurred, you have no experience, no living experience, nothing to fall back on to go, you know what, last time I did that, it didn't work out very well. So instead, I'm going to just tell the truth. You have nothing that you can fall back on that will help you through your very first time dealing with this kind of thing. And unfortunately, at Uvalde, it appears to me not only did they come out too quickly with a statement and somebody to try to give them a bunch of BS that wasn't true, which really makes you look bad later on down the road, because nothing of what I heard in the very first interview is in line with what we know now. And right now, I still don't think we know everything we need to know. All right, so that was my first sign. The first sign is that they don't know how to handle this in a press briefing or on a PR standpoint. And so we know we're at a department that doesn't really know what they're doing. And whose fault is that? It is the police department's fault. Quite frankly, it is the leadership's fault that they did not prepare and did not take the time to slow things down. And I know people are knocking on the door, people are calling, people are demanding answers, parents are demanding answers. But here is the thing, is that it happens all the time. You have to put the brakes on and say, you know what, we're just not prepared. We haven't gone through all the information. There's so much information. We don't want to have to come back and correct anything because we came out too soon. And that's just the way sometimes things have to be, that maybe waiting an extra 20 minutes, maybe waiting an extra hour, maybe even waiting an extra 2 hours. Maybe you take the parents by themselves into a room of the victims and you say, okay, this is what we know. And we want to tell you, we're just not prepared to tell the world yet because we don't have all the information, but at least get them together. There's so many different ways you can do this that, again, since Uvalde didn't do, at least as far as I can tell, any of those things, that this department was not prepared for this thing. All right, so now let's talk about I'm going to be showing you some weapons. So I want to make sure that if you're watching this and in weapons like handguns scare you, or you get your little feelers hurt, or you begin to, what is it called? You get triggered because you see weapons. I want to be showing you some weapons because I want to show them in order to show you what it is that officers are confronted with when they come to this kind of scene and what they're confronted. I have a second camera that I'm going to show you a door entry, just preliminary. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but just some basic knowledge so that you understand what it is that the officers had to deal with. You may have already heard this stuff, but I want to give you a visual of what this kind of looks like. I don't have all the tools, but I do have enough of the tools, including the weapons, that you can see where the fear begins to set in. All right. And so I just want to make sure and give you that disclaimer. If any of this hurts your feelings, like the person who couldn't stand seeing the koozie at a Kroger, I think it is, and it triggered her and she got all full of vapors and she had to call Kroger and said, I can't look at this koozie because it has the American flag on it and a picture of a handgun. And so I need you to remove it from its shelves. And apparently they did that because one person got the vapors from a koozie. All right. I'm telling you up front, I'm going to show you some guns. One of them is an AR-15 and one of them is a handgun. And so I just want you to know that. All right. So let's talk about fear and in relationship to police officers as they are on a radio call. So what happens when you're on patrol? You're on patrol or you're actually in the station and you're listening to the radio. Sometimes the radio's on in the station. You can hear what's going on, or maybe at your desk. If you're a detective, you may on occasion have the radio on and you can hear what's going on. And all of a sudden this call comes in of an active shooter inside of an elementary school. And again, if the inside the police department, if the radios are not on, quite often when something like this happens, especially in a small police department, dispatch will call into the PA of the station and say, everybody be aware we have an active shooter, because in a small department, quite often they have to pull from people that are inside the building because they only have 3 or 4 cops out on the street, and 2 of them are out at lunch or what have you, or maybe one called in sick. And so you have these things that can occur where you need more than the 2 or 3 officers that are out on the beat. And now you need to say, okay, Jimmy John, we know that you're in the station. Get in the car and respond to, Rob's school, and because there's an active shooter. And so this call comes in, active shooter, and what is it that begins to go through a police officer's mind? And it's one of 2 things. And I said this yesterday on my show, and so make sure that if you want more detail, you watch yesterday's show. Is that first initial hearing of this kind of call is either yes, this is what I've been waiting for all my career, or oh crap, I was hoping this would never happen while I was working, and that's the reason I came to a small department, because these things don't happen in a small department. And you're kind of, do I step on the gas and go? Do I find something else to do? And so you have one of 2 reactions. There's only those 2 reactions. It's either yes, let's go, or oh shoot, I'm not sure if I'm ready for this. Am I? What am I going to do? I hope there's a perimeter spot I can take. And this worry kind of comes through. How do I know this? Is because I've trained police officers all over the United States, hundreds, if not thousands of them, and I've had these very similar thoughts echoed to me when they come to my scenario and they say, all right, Officer Smith, this is the scenario that you're coming into. We have an active shooter, and we have 1 person down, and it's over. The first place I need you to go is right over here, is where we have a position that I need you to take, and then from that point on, this is all yours, and I need you to handle it. And I either get, oh no, I've never done this before. I'm not sure what to do. Yes, that is an exact quote from officers that have been at police departments for 10, 15, 20 years, who are active duty police officers who come to a training scenario where I have given them the information and say, ready, go. And they go, I don't know what to do. What? What do you mean you don't know what to do? And it's very shocking. It was very shocking. The very first time I heard this, I said, so what? So what if you've never done this before? So what? I don't understand that response. I never understood that response. Why did you become a police officer if you did not have your first thought being, yes, hopefully I do this right. Hopefully I don't get anybody killed. Let's go. I'm going to take on this scenario. Where, who's my backup? Do I have some guys get excited and they say, do I have backup? Do I have a helicopter? Do I have SWAT team available? And they ask a bunch of questions as they are going and as they're walking towards that position. While I have other officers who kind of lean back and say, I don't know what to do. Can you help me? Can you tell me? Wait, you've been doing this for 10, 15, 20 years. So you have one or 2 of those responses. And so that's what happens when a real call comes out. Hey, Shar, nice to see you. Thank you, Shar. I really appreciate that. She says, hello again, interested in hearing your perspective. All right. So this is I'm going to have to do another show to come up with probably a little bit more of what happens here, but I'm going to give you the first initial thoughts and what happens and what can happen, Shar. So I hope this makes some sense. So if you go back to my show yesterday, where you have people that become police officers and get pushed through or get carried through because everybody realizes in the process that this person probably should not be a police officer, but because we have so few people applying for these positions at law enforcement agencies, is that you got to go, you know what, you're bad, but you're not that bad. And it seems like you really want a job. It would be better if you were an accountant, or you were maybe even an attorney, maybe something else, a politician, because you really don't have what it takes. But since you're here and you're warm and have blood flowing through your veins, you know what? We're going to do what we can to get you through this process so that we can get you on the street and hopefully make something out of you. That is the wrong way to do this. This is, again, not how we used to do it. The process of getting out on the street, every step along the way was to how to get you out. Even if you were a good candidate, they tried to get you out because they didn't like the color of your hair. They didn't like that you were white, or they didn't like something about you, that you were too short or too tall, but you had everything it took. They were still trying to get you out. And if you made it through after they tried to get you out by every means possible, then it was more likely you were going to have some success. But that's not what's happening today, is that they were coddling and carrying people and putting them through. And so when that call comes in, the reaction isn't, oh my gosh, I cannot wait to get in there. It is, oh my gosh, I can't do this. I'm afraid. I'm scared. And so this is even before you're on scene, some of these officers. And I'm afraid to tell you that based on what I've heard on the radio transmissions and some of the other recordings that I've heard and why they're standing out there so long is that this is kind of what's going on in their head. They may not be saying it out loud. They may not be even thinking it out loud, if you know what I mean, but their hesitation says everything. They're asking for one more thing is a way of not going in, of not going forward, of not checking the door to see if it's unlocked. Based on everything that I've seen and heard, they never even checked to see if the door was unlocked. And it turns out that what I'm hearing is that the door was unlocked. All right, so why does this happen? And so I'm going to get into a little bit of science here. I'm not a biologist, but I'm going to tell you that there's a few things that you need to know. Is that when you feel fear, I wrote it down because I always forget the name. Amygdala, Amygdala. It gets activated. Amygdala is the name of it, but it's pronounced probably way different. That's a portion of your brain where it gets activated when the fear hits, and you begin to perspirate, you begin to breathe heavy, you begin to, your alertness actually is enhanced, and that alertness either causes you problems or it gives you something good. You need to be alert and need to see what's going on, but in some cases that's bad, right? And so all these things begin to happen automatically to us when we are afraid, but what ends up happening is that it triggers another part of our body, which begins to trigger hormones, which gives you the decision whether to run or to stay. Run or to stay, flight or fight, fight or flight, flight or fight. And you're going to make a decision based on one of those things. And what also it triggers, which is the important thing, and this is what I mentioned earlier that you need to understand, is that when it comes to your experience, whether your experience is real life or your experience is through a PowerPoint presentation, that memory gets triggered in that process of the amygdala and the hippocampus and the hormones. It triggers your memories, and your memories, bam, go. And it gets triggered. Now, these memories are either going to cause you to even think faster to fly, to flee, or to go in and fight and to go in stronger. And so just understand, we all know flight or fight. Everybody's heard it before, but these things happen so quickly, right? You hear the call, you're driving there, you're getting closer. Now you're talking to yourself. Now your memories are kicking in. What do I do next? What gun do I grab? Do I grab the long rifle? Do I grab the shotgun? Do I just go in with my handgun? Where's my shield? Where's my Halligan tool that I'm going to use to pry the door open? All these things begin to happen. And that's your memory kicking in to remember what tools it is that you need to take with you and what you need to have. All right, all that stuff begins to happen. At the same time, you are now either making further decisions what you're going to do next, and you begin to either become frozen in your thought, or you become more active in what it is you plan on doing. You're not going to, some guys are just going to go right in and they're not going to stop, and they're going to go right through that door and they're going to try to take out the bad guy, or they're going to get taken out themselves. Other people are on their way looking, oh, I don't have enough stuff. I'm not ready. I'm not prepared. I need one more guy. I need a now perimeter officer. I need a helicopter. I need the SWAT team to respond. I need another radio. I need. These are the things that are causing you to prolong your desire to go in there, which is making it worse. And so I want to tell you, I've had lots of questions about, well, what about the parents? There was a mom that went in there and she wasn't afraid. Or you had a dad that went in there. He wasn't afraid. And I'm going to tell you right now that same fear, remember we talked about fight or flight, that same fear that's causing them to go in after their kid, the love of their child, is the same fear of a police officer whose child is not in there that's keeping them from going into that room. This is not a good reason necessarily for this situation. This isn't a positive thing. It's not an excuse for the police officer. I just want you to understand that the very same fear, when somebody asks me, what about the parent that went in there? Well, yeah, their fear for the life of their child overpowered their thought process, and the fight or flight came in. They chose fight. I'm going to go in there and fight for my kid. That triggering caused them to make a decision. It caused them to make a decision. It's barely a thought process. It's a causation of the fear. The same thing that caused this woman, the mother or the father, to go in because they knew their child was in there, was the same fear, again, understand me, that caused this officer or one of the officers not to go in, because they want to see their children again. They want to see their wife again. They want to see their family again. And that same fear did this. One went in and one stayed out. All right, so that's a possibility. The other thing is fear is contagious. Fear is caught by the other people that are responding. If they see somebody standing and saying, hey, don't go that way, so they go, okay, why not? Because there's a gunman down there. Okay, and I see that you're afraid, so now I'm going to be afraid. And now it's contagious. And if you had somebody that was a wobbler that was deciding whether to go in or not and saw you in fear, they go, oh, he's afraid, then I'm afraid. Especially if it's a friend of yours. And in a small police department, you're really good friends with the other people that are going on there, or that are working in there. And so you have all these things that are happening as people are going on. Again, these are just so that you understand what's happening, why these officers probably did what they did. They're unexperienced, never experienced this kind of thing before. They've never been in an active shooter. They've never been in even the scene. They've had, again, I told you, Uvalde had 2 homicides in 9 years. It's a good chance that none of the officers are there even saw a dead body in relationship to a homicide. They may have seen a suicide or an elderly person or somebody that died of natural causes, but that's completely different than looking at a body that has been killed by somebody and gunshot wounds and blood spatter on a wall or somebody's head cut off with a machete. That is completely different. And you don't even have that experience to fall back on to say, I didn't die, nothing bad happened, I survived, and you were able to move on past that. If they don't have that, and this is their first experience, it's going to cause most people to freeze. Just to share that with you. All right. So lack of experience. That's probably contagious. The same motivators that cause somebody to go in is the same motivators that causes somebody not to go in. And you have this contagion, this process where people are now deciding, well, we just need one more thing, is now, again, we talk about snowballs. I've said this several times, but it is a snowball effect. And people are freezing outside the door. All right. So as these officers, and I'm going to try to do this here without knocking too much stuff over, and hopefully this will work. All right. Well, here's the funny thing that this has nothing to do with what I'm talking about, but I used a green pen. So you're going to see, it looks like you can see through this. It's because the pen is green. So anyway, it looks like the officers, let me come back on this other side over here. It looks like that, at least from one of the photos that I have here, is that you have these officers. There's little circles there. You have officers that are here on the corner, and there's another corner down here that I didn't have room to fit it all in. And they can look down this hallway, and I believe that there's a door here. Now, I don't have the map of what this classroom looks like, but this is my rendering of what I think it looks like. So you have this is covered, so it's indoors, this hallway. You got 2 officers here, and I think there was another officer here on this other side, and they're looking down. They have to cover the space, get to this door, and in schools, doors open out. Like not in a house, like in our house, our front door, that door opens in, and that's why we can kick a door in to go inside somebody's house very easily. But not on a schoolroom. They're quite often they're metal, fire grade doors, and the frame around the door entry is also made out of metal. Strong steel. And so booting that door is not an option. You need what's called a Hooligan tool or a pry tool or a crowbar to get these doors open. And it's not easy, especially if they have a cover that goes over the top of the locking mechanism. And again, it's a process. You need training. You need to do it, and you need to learn how to do it fast. All right. So they're looking down here, and this is where they're kind of frozen in time. All this thought process of how they're going to get from here to open the door, and then where is the bad guy? Is the bad guy in the opposite corner with all the kids? Are there dead bodies down here as on the entry point? Again, this is all going on, and the longer they wait and hear the gunshots going off, they're thinking about all the things that are before them that they can't quite cover everything, just by themselves. And that's why I think the guy, at least one guy, or if not 2 guys, kept thinking they needed more people, is that they're thinking the complexity of dealing with this. And again, the training should have told them that it doesn't matter. You need to go in. When we have an active shooter, the option of waiting is not an option. That used to be an option back in the day, but it's no longer an option. All right. So as they're standing there looking down the hallway, they're looking at the doors, and they know, and I think there was some training again done before this, and they have kind of an idea what they're up against. And they're thinking of all the excuses not to go in. On top of that, they're thinking about the weapons, right? I believe that they knew that there was probably an automatic weapon, or they could hear it was an automatic weapon. This is the bullet. Oh, sorry about my hands there. There we go. I must have green on my hands. Anyway, this is a 5.56. So it's a 5.56 round. This box cost about $100. For this, my green screen is kicking in. But that's what it looks like. It's got a point on the end. Wow, this is really hard to do with the green screen. Do you see it there? All right. So you got that. And then they either have 9mm or 45 rounds. The only bullets I have right now is this is a 45 handgun, and this is the round that goes in the 45. It's pretty big and pretty thick. And so these officers, they know what kind of guns are going on. They know about guns because every police officer shoots a gun. And so you have the idea that, well, how are we going to overcome this? And the reason I showed you both bullets is this. If the shield that we see that's in that hallway can be a couple different kinds of shields. It could be just a shield that gives you some type of visual protection, or it gives you protection from somebody throwing a brick at you or trying to punch you. And that's all that shield is really good for. Then you have other shields that are good for handguns, which is more of a stubby. This also can have a hollow point on the end of it. But for a stubby type of handgun, it'll stop that kind of gun, but will not stop a rifle. See, this rifle is pointed and it flies through the air at a very high rate of speed, and will go right through a bullet grade, a pistol grade shield, where you need a rifle grade shield. So again, I'm just giving you things that are going to be working on the police officer's minds. The shield, he knows what kind of shield he is, and that could be messing with him too. He goes, oh, you know what? We don't have the rifle shield. I still can't go in. No, that's all. You see, these are all the excuses that people are going through. And I've heard these excuses made. Well, they didn't maybe have the right shield. It doesn't matter. At this point, it doesn't matter. You have an active shooter. You can hear him shooting children in there. You have phone calls coming in from kids that are on the inside saying that my friend next to me was just shot and killed. You have this information coming. None of this stuff matters. I'm only telling you is because I know exactly what it is that's going on in their head, is their reasoning why they can't go in. These are the excuses. When you hear these excuses, that's what they are. They're excuses. When your kids give you excuses and you go, listen, you need to just do what I told you to do. These are excuses. So don't get fooled into thinking they couldn't go in. No, they could still go in. I think everybody knows that, but I just want to make sure that there's not people out there that are looking at this and thinking, well, he's right. He didn't have a rifle grade shield, and so maybe they needed to wait. No, it doesn't matter. But people are talking about it anyway. All right. So can you go in with a handgun? Now, there's no magazine in here. Do you see that? No magazine. And there's no rounds inside the handgun. All right. So as you're going in and you are making entry, can you go in and take down a man with a rifle? Yes, you can. And I'm going to show you how. At least have a good chance. Right? You still could get shot and killed. It's still possible, but you can do it. It's not like it's impossible. Because again, the next excuse is that, well, we just had handguns. We didn't have anybody there with a long rifle. Now, I see pictures with a lot of police officers with long guns, AR-15s or some other type of long gun as they're going in there. And so I don't know what they're talking about when they say, well, we only had handguns. Well, it doesn't matter. Again, doesn't matter. Because number one, I did see rifles. Number two, if they didn't have rifles, they still could have taken care of the job. All right. So what's an AR look like? So you have your AR, which is this handgun right here. And I'm not sure if it won't fit entirely in the thing, but it is menacing, right? It is kind of scary what it is that you're up against here. And you have the magazine, and this is a 10 rounder, just so anybody watching that, wants to make sure that I'm within compliance with the state of California. Yes, it's a 10 round, and it goes in there, and multiple rounds. The bullets come out as you pull the trigger. There's no longer any automatic. This used to be an automatic weapon. The weapon I carried when I was on the streets was an automatic weapon back in the day, in the 80s and 90s, but no longer is, at least the weapons being sold, automatic in the sense full auto. These are semi-auto, which every time you pull the trigger, a bullet comes out. You take it out and you replace the magazine and put in a new one. All right. So that's what this looks like. And this is what they're up against. So yes, if you were to you know, on a logical standpoint, when nobody's shooting at you, look at, yeah, the advantage goes to the guy with the long rifle. However, you can overcome it with a handgun. All right, so I'm going to come to my other camera over here. Now you're going to see the magic, how the magic happens. And now you see me over here. All right, so I'm going to come over here to this door. And I'm going to first use the handgun. And so one of the problems is that they never, as far as I can tell, and the reporting is, they never tried the door to see if it was unlocked. And they would have probably found that it was unlocked. That is not that uncommon. I've had, been on raids with, investigators and detectives as we go to take down a door, whether it's a SWAT team or not, and they don't even check to see if the door is unlocked. They just boot the door. On a house, it's fairly easy. You just come up to the door, you got your handgun out, and then you boot the door right at the doorknob. So you come up with your boot, and if this was opening that direction, understand again, this door opens this way. So, but you kick and you push through, but you have to kick right next to the doorknob, and you push, and you will break the molding on the door. I forget what it's called, but the frame of the door, and that door will go inside. And you go right in. And quite often, I sometimes will wonder, why didn't you check? Why didn't you check to see if it was unlocked? It's not that unusual. I know this seems very strange, but we just assume, I think most police officers assume that doors are locked. And so they just go right home and kick them. So there was no chance that there's no, at least based on what I've heard and what I've seen in pictures, I haven't seen video yet, that they didn't check the door. All right, so when you are making entry on a door like this, which opens out, and you have a pry tool, so you have a pry tool that you shove into the door, and then you pry the frame away from the door that will allow the little chingadero, which is this thing right here, to come through and to come out so you can get this door open. And it takes more than one person in most cases. You come in here and you pry back, you pry the frame away from the door, then somebody opens this door and pushes it open. So you need two guys. So you have one person prying, you have one guy opening, and you open the door and it swings open. There's usually another guy on the other side of the door who catches the door so it doesn't swing back. And now he's got a gun, I've got a gun. This guy with a tool is often not armed, or he'll have a rifle slung around his shoulder, and he gets out of the way, and now he drops the tool, he regains his weapon, and now you begin to make entry. So what's the important thing to know as you're coming in? And that is, if you have only a handgun, and the rifle is actually the same thing, as this door comes open, you can see that there's a bad guy standing right there, right? So I have my bad guy here. I don't have a guy on the other side holding the door. You have a bad guy right there. Right now, he can't see me and I can't see him. So what you want to make sure and not do as a police officer is come around and stick your head, because now you're dead. Right? So what you need to do as you come around is, we call it cutting the pie, and you slowly come out, and I can right now see his shoulder. And I can see his shoulder, and right now, if I know that this is a guy that I'm going to take out, you can then drop out, and then bam, and you hit him at like 2 or 3 rounds before he can fire at you. But you want to come out away from this door and come in. As you are over here, you can see into the room that direction. And it's very hard to hit me if he's in that room that far. Now, can he? Yes, but it's difficult if you are in a really good position and you come out. And now, so I'd say I don't see anybody yet, but as I'm moving, I'm looking, and I can communicate to what I see to these guys over here as they're looking in that direction, and tell them what I see. I see 3 kids. I see a teacher on the ground. I see 2 people on the ground, and bad guy. He's at the far northeast corner. He's whatever, right? Or I maybe take 2 shots at him, or I go in because he's occupied or busy. All these decisions are made. I want you to understand, and what I'm trying to tell you is, it is not necessarily, it can be, it's not necessarily open the door and run in, and then you get shot. There's got to be some tactics taken as you're going in many cases. Every scenario is slightly different, but as you pull over the door, you step back, and now you can see a sliver of the room, and you begin to scan the room as you're coming out. And you make decisions. And one of those is going to fire, or one of them is going to go in. And you can be the lead guy, or the other guy is the lead guy. And as soon as you say you go straight in this way. You're hoping this guy is covering this side of the wall, and then you make your decisions as you go in. Now, as far as if you have a rifle, the rifle is not much difference. Now, I don't have a sling, but your sling is holding your rifle down here close to your body. It gets pried open, bring it up. And the same thing happens as you're coming around, and you see the guy's shoulder, and bam, you can take a shot at his shoulder and take him down, and then come in and then go down and then shoot him. If he has a hostage, that's a completely different situation. But understand that these things happen in a very tactical way. And right now I can just see the edge of his shoulder. And I have a full shot right there. And I could just hit him on the shoulder and take him down right away. Now, is he going to be standing there still like my little statue here? No, he may be waving back and forth and doing a bunch of different things. We don't know. A whole bunch of different things can be happening. But again, you do this. Oops, sorry. You take this on tactically. And you do it in a way that is safe as you're beginning to enter. So here are the things I just wanted to bring up today. Why did they freeze? All the reasons I told you. Lack of experience, no history, no memory of how they handled it the first time. PowerPoint teaching and training, and walking through something and maybe getting shot with a couple paintballs is decent training, but you really need to take them through some very hard training that actually scares them and puts them in a position where they have to make some hard decisions, and maybe even frighten them a little bit and put some flashbangs, really challenge their senses. That training needs to be very strong. And really challenge them to push through something that frightens them or makes them scared. That's the kind of training you need. Minus that, you're honestly not very prepared for these types of situations when they come up. Minus that, what you need is you need to hire people that have the desire to do the job fully and not partially, or are doing it just because they like the pay and like the benefits. That's not why you become a police officer. I went through a whole list of things why you become a police officer. And so we need to hire men and women who understand that their job is to go in regardless of what they have. Regardless of what they have available. If they get to a active shooter at a school, that you hire people that you believe, when it actually comes down to it, that they're going to run into that door regardless of all the tools, not coming through all the excuses that I gave you, all the things that they thought of as an excuse not to go in, is not how you want a police officer to think. You want them to think, what do I need to do now, regardless of the tools I have available? I just showed you how they could have done it very safely. They didn't need to run through that door. They could have started very quickly. They could have tested the door to see if it was unlocked or not. They could have diversion, and we didn't talk that much about that, and maybe I will on the next show, where they could have thrown a rock through a back window. On the drawing that I showed you, there's a back door, right? From what we heard, that's where the suspect entered. The door that they're trying to go through is what would be considered the front door inside that hallway. And so there's all kinds of diversions that could have taken place on the back door or a back window. They could have knocked on that second door that's down the hallway a little bit further. They could have pried both doors open at the same time and cause a diversion or cause the suspect to be confused. And there's so much that could have been done that none of that stuff was discussed. And so to wrap this up, 43 minutes. I meant to do this in 30 minutes. To wrap this up, and I'm going to get to some of these questions here that are on there, or some of the comments that are on here, is that there's so much to this situation, this particular incident is what I was looking for. This incident that this police department needs a complete shakeup and turnover from the chief down, because it's just, there's no one there out of the 30 officers of what I've seen so far that did the job properly. There was not anyone that did anything in regard to the public relations, into handling the call through from a chain of command standpoint, that did the right thing. I've seen them speak on camera. None of them sound like they have any knowledge of law enforcement. They have no knowledge of how to talk through an incident when it comes to public relations. From the pictures I've seen, there was every excuse not to go in and no reasons to go in until another agency got there. And again, remember, when I talk about larger agencies like the Border Patrol or even the sheriff's departments, they're much larger. They have much more area to cover. They're much more likely to have been in a situation where they've dealt with active shooters or a robbery in progress or a drive-by shooting in progress or something like that. Not Uvalde, because they were a small police department. But you had these other ones come in and say, what are you guys waiting out here for? Let's go in. The problem is now they're under the jurisdiction of Uvalde. And Uvalde's saying, no, we need you to stand down. The chief of police said not to go in yet. And then for a moment, they're sitting there going, this doesn't make any sense. But in a hierarchy, like a military hierarchy like we have in the police department, for a moment, they're saying, we got to follow this chain of command. It may be wrong, but we're following. Maybe they know something we don't know. I mean, you would think that coming into another agency, and I've been involved in a lot of assist other department calls where I'm either I'm from Anaheim and I'm in La Palma or I'm in Brea or I'm wherever, where I have to go there and say, okay, what is it you need me to do? How do you need me to help you? And then I have to listen to what they have to say. I have to listen to what their commanders say, and I don't go against that, because now I'm a representative of Anaheim Police Department, and the worst thing I could do is come in there and say, okay, screw you guys, I'm doing what I want to do. That just doesn't happen. But at some point, you can disobey an unlawful command. And in some ways, I would think that not going in when the industry standard for law enforcement is to go in on an active shooter at a school, not to wait, that at some point that became an unlawful command. And that's why you saw Border Patrol take the lead, and probably a sheriff's officer, sheriff deputy come in and take the lead and disobey essentially the unlawful commands of the chief of police, I think, who was in charge of the scene, and say, screw that, we're going in. And that's what ended up happening. That needed to happen sooner. It's sad that this happened in such a police department where all of these things I talked about is what happened. I'm telling you, I know for sure that you had an unprepared police department in a situation that they did not know how to handle, and it caused them to freeze. And that is why the officers froze. No life experience, no real good training on how to handle these situations. And it comes from the top down, It is unfortunate for these officers that they were hired. It is the department's fault for hiring them. These officers were not prepared. They were not trained properly. They were probably hired, and they shouldn't have been hired. And it's unfortunate that for these families that this happened in this city at this time. In other cities this size, you can go through an entire 3 decades, 4 decades, and never even test your police department. I know police officers never have pulled their weapons out of their holsters on duty. They've done it at the range, or they've done it to get the cheese, or from Taco Bell, or get the lettuce out of their guns, out of their magazine pouches, and they go, I've just never had a need to pull my gun. And that's usually what you get at small police departments that have 30 or 40 officers in some of these cities that are around us. That's, again, why they go there. They think, if I go to this department, I get to wear the badge, I get to have a gun, I get to drive a cool car around, and people think I'm really nice and cool. But the good news is I came to this department because nothing really happens here. And that's why they went there. And here they are in a situation where they were not prepared and not ready and never wanted to be in that position, truly. And it's unfortunate. So I believe this police department just needs to be gutted and needs to start all over again. If they want to call me to help them with that, I'd be happy to help them with some decision making and some training if they need it. That would be really important for them to have. All right, so sorry, let me get to these things. I hope all this made sense. I want to make sure and give you some understanding. And some of it's hard to explain. Some of it is difficult to say. But some of it needs to be said. Thinking of those kids makes me sick. I feel for those parents who tried to go in. As a parent, I am going in, no hesitation. Yeah, and that is what we have as parents. It's going to cause us to go. There's not going to be any hesitation. And Shar, I think you would go if it wasn't your kid. I think if you had responded, you see your kid coming out quite often, not quite often, but quite seriously, the decision not to go in may now change, right? I'm not sure, Shar. That's actually an history question. What do you think? Let me ask you, because you're a very strong woman. You get up and speak at school board meeting. I mean, you walk the walk and you talk the talk. But what would happen? Do you understand my question? Is that with your kid inside there, there's no doubt. I mean, I don't care which kid. I love all my kids. I would go in if one of my kids was in there. But for me, if my kids were safe, I would still go in because of how I was trained and how I was raised, and that's my job as a man on this earth. And there is a difference between men and women. And I feel strongly that as a man, my job is to protect women and children. That is my job. And so I would go in, even if it wasn't my kids. For a mom, Shar, if you're still on, what do you think? If your child is not in there, and if you don't feel like answering, that's cool. What about that? What do you think? If you see that your child is safe, now think, okay, my child is safe. Now think, now would I go in? I don't know. Because do you see what I'm saying? Do you see where these officers were, and how you can look at the scenario a little bit differently and say, look at those parents went in, but the cops didn't. Yeah, but they're having the same thought that you're having, that I don't want to die because I want to see my kids. Why would I go in there and sacrifice myself when my kids are safely here? And so that kind of changes things just a little bit. Fight, flight, freeze. Yeah, they definitely froze. Everyone, well, not everyone. Rose asked, did everyone freeze? And I believe that's your question. And at least the initial officers, I believe it was the Uvalde officers, as far as I could tell, were the ones that froze. And there's a sheriff deputy there too. And the only reason I can tell that is because why? Because it says sheriff on the back of his vest. And I'm not sure what he was saying. I don't know exactly what his words were, if we heard them on a recording or not. But somebody said, hey, we need to get in there. And somebody said, stand down. The chief said, no, don't go in yet. And again, whoever it was, even if it's from Border Patrol or the Sheriff's Department, they had to stand down, but they shouldn't have stand down and should have violated that direct order. So not everyone, but they froze long enough. They froze far too long. Shar says, I think they were taking direction from the chief to stand down. Yes, that's my understanding too, Shar. Thanks for the review, and sad. It is sad. Shar, oh boy, that's a tough one, right? If my child is not in there, do I risk my life going in? If I'm armed, I think I would. Yeah, Shar, for some reason, I didn't mean to pick on you specifically, but for some reason, when I think of you, I think that there's a good chance that if you were armed, that you would go in. But again, do you see how difficult it is? Do you see what it is that a human being, I just want to take this out of the law enforcement side of things, because we think when you put a uniform on that now we just expect you just need to do this thing. You need to go do that. But inside that uniform is a human being. And sometimes there's a human being in there that should not be a police officer. They're not necessarily a bad person. And that's why I'm very sad and very uncomfortable sometimes talking about this thing, because I'm not telling you that Uvalde officer, the first, the second, or the third Uvalde officer that responded and arrived, I don't think necessarily that they're bad people in the sense that they're just bad people. It is that they are a person who are in a job where they shouldn't be in that position. They should not be in that job. And it's because we allowed them to get that job that they thought they wanted, but weren't really prepared to do. All right. So this can be very complex, and I'm trying to take something that's really complex and trying to simplify it in some ways. And I know I may be doing the opposite of that. But do you understand what I'm saying? Is that you have these human beings that really think they want to do this job. They've seen it on TV. Maybe they played, some type of video game or something like that, and it seems really fun. But sorry, I'm sweating a lot here in this room. But they are human beings that have all these same things that all of us have: fear, adrenaline, decision-making that can be wrong and could be right, fight or flight, all these things going on like all of us. But it takes a very special person to be able to then follow through for somebody else that you're not related to, that's not a family member, that you don't even know, that you're going to run into that room for somebody you don't know and get shot. And you're going to sacrifice yourself for somebody you don't know. That takes a special person. And so I want to make sure you understand that I'm not saying necessarily these officers are bad. Did they do something criminal? I don't know. I don't know enough yet that they do anything criminal. They can fall back on their following orders from the chief of police. He may be held criminal. It may be because he was safely in his car or somebody at Starbucks. I don't know. I don't know where he was, but he could be held criminal. Are these officers going to be held criminal? I don't know yet. I don't know enough information. As I find out more information, I'll let you know. But we have human beings that are in a position they should have been in, because based on what I saw, They were not committed. They were not committed to going in. All right, my friends. I tried to keep it at 30 minutes, but here we are approaching an hour. I appreciate you guys watching. I love your feedback. I've gotten so many comments from people on Messenger and text and things like that. Please let me know if I was all over the place or not, or if I gave you good content and good information. I do have another perspective I want to look at some point. I may not come back tomorrow, maybe in a couple days, because some of these things are, I want to try to find out some more information. So please let me know what it is you think. And if you liked it and you think other people should hear it, please share. We're broadcasting on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, and Rumble. So any one of those platforms, go to one of those platforms if you're not there, and share out your favorite if you would like. All right, my friends. Thank you for watching. I appreciate you guys very much. Take care. Talk to you later. Bye.